Kerr.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate my friend, the member for Aberdeen South, on his speech. It is deeply humbling for me to follow the honourable member, my honourable friend, the member for Congleton, and my friend, the honourable member for Strangford. When I think of those two members in particular, I think of the line in Paul's epistle to the Romans in the first chapter, 16th verse, which says, "I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ." And I also thought, in relation to the speech delivered by the honourable member for Strangford, he embodied the famous saying of St Francis of Assisi, "Preach the gospel at all times, when necessary, use words." Because the emotion of what he had to say was very, very powerful. And I'd like to thank my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, for commissioning this report. It's the measure of that particular member of this House that he felt the need to commission this report in the first place. And I'd also like to thank the Bishop of Truro for the work he undertook to highlight the scale of Christian persecution in the world. It is an excellent piece of work, the report, and I hope the conclusions and recommendations will be carefully studied and accepted and actioned. And I cannot truly convey, Mr Deputy Speaker, the emotions that I felt while reading the Bishop of Truro's report. The scale of the persecution of Christians is truly shocking and horrific. No one should be persecuted because of how or who they worship. It is a fundamental part of many of the members of this House's spiritual DNA that every person should have the basic human right of freedom of thought, conscience and religion. And therefore I will just very quickly say I fully support the Bishop's recommendations that freedom of religion or belief become the underpinning of the operation of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And unlike my honourable friend, I endorse the need for a diplomatic code. I think some of our diplomats need to have clear direction in relation to the response that's appropriate to the persecution of Christians, because I feel ashamed that so many Christians have been persecuted throughout the world and that we have done so little to stop it or even to speak out about it. It is right that we have spoken out to condemn the violent actions that have been taken against other minority groups, but it is wrong that at times we have been too restrained, too silent in our condemnation of the persecution of Christians. May I also say that I agree with the Bishop when he says that the Christian persecution is calling out Christian persecution is not imperialistic, nor is it a case of white privilege. It is, as he says, and was quoted by the honourable member for Truro, my friend, the member for Truro, it is not about special pleading for Christians, he said, but making up a significant deficit, because Christian persecution accounts for 80% of all religious persecution in the world. And our country must act. We have a special responsibility, a moral responsibility, because of the privileged status we have in the world, and with our head of state being the head of a Christian church, to speak out to protect Christians around the world. Renewing our focus, as the Bishop says, on Christian persecution is actually a way of expressing our concern for all minorities who find themselves under pressure, and ignoring Christian persecution might well mean we've ignored other forms of repression as well. And with the seconds I have left, may I make a plea to the Minister that we will use our soft power in order to exercise as much influence as we can in the world in respect to speaking up for Christians. I think it's high time, actually, that we escalated the role of the Prime Minister's envoy in relation for freedom of religion or belief. We actually need to follow the American example and have a dedicated ambassador at large for international freedom of religion or belief, with a formal structure of support, engaging with faith leaders at home and abroad, and articulating recommendations for cross-government action in this instance.
Linden.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. As others have done, I too wish to pay tribute to the Honourable Gentleman Member for Croydon South, who opened today's discussion in quite eloquent